She didn't cry again when her husband's mother called her barren. She had used up all her tears the year before. What was left now was just a quiet ache sitting inside her chest like an uninvited guest that wouldn't leave. 10 years of marriage, and not even one missed period. The village women started whispering louder. The market women began asking questions they had no business asking. And her mother-in-law? That one turned the compound into a furnace. Every insult carried its own heat. She tried everything, roots and herbs, fasting and prayers. One time she even drank the urine of a woman with twins, as one herbalist instructed. Nothing changed. The only thing growing was the shame. Her husband, Chike, had stopped defending her. These days, he just sat quiet when the insults flew, scratching the bald spot at the side of his head like it was her fault. Then came the suggestion, sharp like a slap and just as unexpected. If you want to carry child, go and find the madman that walks by the stream, an old woman whispered to her one evening. I've seen it work. He touches a woman, and her belly grows. That man is not ordinary. At first, she laughed. She thought it was a bad joke. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The words rolled over and over in her head like hot gari on fire. The madman. The one with dreadlocks like a bird's nest. The one who spoke to trees and danced in the rain. The one people threw stones at, but who never threw back. She began to watch him differently after that. Not with fear, but with curiosity. What if? By the third day, the question wasn't just in her head. It was in her chest, in her steps, in the way she now stood still whenever she heard his laugh echo through the street. And then one morning, she woke up and walked down to the stream. Her heart thumped, unsure if she was mad, or desperate enough to listen to madness. The path to the stream was silent, too silent. Even the birds seemed to be watching her. Her feet moved, but her head screamed. What if someone saw her? What if the whispers turned to shouts? What if he touched her and nothing happened? She paused behind the tall cassava shrubs, her chest rising like she had just run a race. There he was, barefoot, shirt torn at the sides, mumbling to himself and drawing patterns in the sand with a stick. His face was smudged with dust, but his eyes, those eyes didn't look mad. They looked like they had seen too much. She stepped forward. The stick froze mid-draw. He turned. You've been watching, he said. His voice was not cracked or broken. It was calm. Too calm for a madman. She began, then stopped. What was she even going to say? That she wanted his seed like he was a medicine? That they said he could give what her husband couldn't? I know why you're here, he said, wiping his hand on his torn trousers. But are you ready for what comes with it? She blinked. This was not how she imagined it. Where were the screams? The running? The madness? I just want a child, she whispered. He stood. Tall. Calm. He looked at her the way a farmer looks at dry soil, measuring. You came here alone, he said. That means you already chose. Her legs shook. Something about him felt sacred and wild, like thunder trapped inside a mun. He stretched out his hand. The wind picked up. She took a step forward. Another. Their fingers touched. And just like that, the world didn't feel the same again. She didn't tell anyone what happened that morning by the stream. Not even her husband. She just came home, washed her wrapper, boiled yam, and acted like the world hadn't turned sideways. But inside her, something had shifted. The silence in her heart was gone. Now, there was a strange hum, like a drum beating softly beneath her ribs. The days passed slowly. Her mother-in-law still hissed when she walked by. The neighbors still pointed. Nothing changed outside. But inside, her chest felt fuller, her back heavier. Then came the morning her stomach turned before she could even finish her OG. The smell of palm oil made her gag. She threw up behind the compound, holding her knees, laughing and crying at the same time. She didn't need a test. Her body was already speaking. She knew. She was pregnant. Her hands trembled as she touched her belly, as if it were too good to be true. 10 years of waiting, and now this. She ran to the backyard and screamed. Loud. Mad, joyful. The neighbors peeked through windows. Someone asked, she done day craze finally? But she didn't care. That same day, her husband came home and saw her dancing with both feet off the ground. She grabbed him and placed his hand on her belly. Feel it, she said, grinning like a girl again. He looked at her, confused. What? I'm carrying your child, she said. Our child. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then his knees buckled and he sat on the floor like a sack of Gary. Are you sure? I've never been this sure in my life. That night, for the first time in years, they both laughed under the same wrapper. The house felt warm again. Whole. But as she drifted to sleep, her mind wandered. She remembered the madman's eyes. She remembered his words, "Are you ready for what comes with it?" And just like that, sleep didn't come so easy. By the time her belly started to show, the entire village knew. Some clapped when they saw her. Some hissed and said, "Even yam way no get leaf fit still spoil." But no one could deny the miracle. 10 years of waiting, and now her feet were swollen with joy. Her mother-in-law changed like harmattan wind turning to rain. She suddenly started calling her my wife, rubbing her belly like it was a community calabash. Neighbors who once called her names now brought firewood and gifts, some out of guilt, some just to get close to her blessing. But with every growing inch of her stomach, something else began to grow, whispers. She no go talk where she carry 'em from. I hear say she go meet that madman by the stream-o. She no human being even touch her. It started with murmurs, then turned into bold stares. Some children began mocking her in songs. Auntie born for Jaga Jaga. Auntie born for Jaga Jaga. She tried to ignore it. She told herself, let them talk. Let them burn with confusion. But it wasn't that simple. One day, while buying peppers in the market, a woman refused to collect her money. "I beg carry your curse go. I no day sell to spirits," the woman spat. Tears gathered, but she held them in like a warrior. She walked home that day with her chin up and her heart torn. Chaik noticed the change. He stopped smiling at her. He no longer touched her belly with joy. One night, he turned to her in bed and asked, "Just tell me the truth. Who touched you?" Her heart cracked. "I told you, I don't want to talk about it," she replied softly. "So it's true," he said, voice rising. "It wasn't me?" She turned her face away and faced the wall. That night, they both lay in the same bed but in different worlds. The baby kicked. Hard. She stopped going to the market after that day. Her feet still swelled, her craving still raged, but her pride refused to shrink. She sent little Kemi, the neighbor's daughter, to help with errands. That way, she could avoid the stares and whispers that followed her like smoke. At home, Chaik grew distant. He no longer waited for her outside the bathroom. He didn't sing to the baby. He avoided her eyes during meals. Something had shifted between them, something heavy, like wet clothes hanging on a weak rope. One evening, as she sat peeling yam under the mango tree, she saw him talking to his cousin behind the house. Their voices were low, but one word floated clearly, DNA. She froze. So it had come to that. The baby kicked again, this time with force. As if reminding her it was there. As if warning her. That night, the storm came. Thunder shook the zinc roof. Rain slapped the windows like angry fists. And then, a knock. Not one. Not two. A slow, steady rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. She opened the door. And there he was. The madman. Soaked to the bone, dreadlocks dripping, shirt clinging to his skin. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her, those eyes again, calm but wild. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, heart pounding. He took a step forward, then paused. "It's almost time," he said. "And they're coming." "Who's coming?" He didn't answer. He turned and walked away, barefoot in the mud, fading into the dark like a shadow returning to its shell. She closed the door slowly, locked it twice, then sat on the floor, hugging her belly. The baby kicked again. Then again. And then, the lights went out. The next morning, the village buzzed with news, whispers sharper than thorns. "The madman came to her house," they said, voices trembling with excitement and fear. Some saw it as a curse, others as a sign. Chaik's cousin spread rumors about what the madman wanted, twisting stories like twisting yam into fufu. The whole family gathered under the big irako tree, speaking in low voices that carried far. She stayed inside, wrapping herself in her thick wrapper, ignoring the stares from behind cracked doors and dusty windows. The baby moved steadily, reminding her life still beat inside. Her husband's face was harder now, carved by doubt and anger. He barely looked at her. When he did, his eyes held storms she could not calm. One afternoon, as she watered the small garden, the madman appeared again. This time, there was no rain, no thunder, only the dry, heavy heat of midday. He sat silently beside her, not saying a word, just watching the sky. She wanted to ask him so many things, but the words stuck like dry leaves in her throat. Finally, he spoke. "They do not understand." She nodded, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "Sometimes, what the world calls madness is just the voice of truth," he said quietly. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not a madman, but a man carrying a heavy story, a story tangled in roots, pain, and secret hope. The baby kicked. She smiled through her tears. Maybe, just maybe, the world would listen someday. Days passed slowly like the river's endless flow. The village's whispers did not fade, they only grew sharper. People pointed fingers and shared secret smiles, their tongues wagging about the madman and the woman who dared step outside their rules. Inside her small house, she clung to hope like a child to a blanket. Her belly grew rounder, and with it, a fierce protective love that pushed away the fear bit by bit. Chaik hardly spoke to her now. When he did, his words cut like dry branches snapping underfoot. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the madman came again. This time, he brought a small wrapped bundle, roots and leaves tied carefully with string. "Take these," he said softly. "They will help." She accepted, her fingers brushing his rough hands. A warmth spread through her like fire on a cold night. "What is this?" she asked. "Medicine," he replied. "For the journey ahead." She looked at him, searching his eyes. "What journey?" He smiled faintly. "The one no one else can see. You and your child walk a path that will not be easy." Her heart skipped a beat. Fear mixed with something strange, something fierce. That night, she lay awake, the bundle resting beside her. The baby moved, a quiet drumbeat of life and promise. Outside, the village slept, unaware of the battle unfolding inside one small house. The days grew heavier with waiting. Her belly swelled like the ripe fruit of the mango tree outside. Chaik's silence turned colder, like harmattan wind cutting through thin cloth. The village's gossip became a dull roar she could no longer ignore. One afternoon, as she sat weaving palm fronds, a sudden knock startled her. At the door stood a woman she barely knew, tall, with eyes sharp as a hawk's. "I heard about your child," the woman said, voice low but clear. "If you want to keep him safe, listen well." She leaned closer. "The village elders are planning something. They don't believe the child is yours. They say it is cursed, born from madness." Fear bubbled in her chest like boiling water. "What can I do?" The woman handed her a small leather pouch. "Take this. It will protect you and the baby. But be careful, trust no one too much." That night, the pouch hung from her neck like a secret shield. She felt its weight with every breath, a quiet promise of safety. Chaik came home later than usual, face unreadable. He didn't speak to her but stared at the pouch. His silence was heavier than words. The baby kicked, strong and steady, like a drum calling for courage. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the ancestors, asking for strength to face the coming storm. The night felt colder than usual. She wrapped herself in her thick wrapper and sat by the small fire, the leather pouch resting against her chest. The flames flickered shadows on the walls, dancing like spirits in a restless night. Chaik finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "I don't know if I can protect you. Or the baby." Her heart ached, but she didn't show it. "We'll face it together," she said, though the fear clung to her like a second skin. Days passed with quiet tension, the kind that creeps in slowly but never leaves. The village elders gathered more often, their faces hard like old stones. Whispers turned to threats. People crossed the street to avoid her, or stared too long like she was already gone. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she felt the baby move fiercely, almost as if warning her. She took the madman's medicine, trusting the mystery that had become her only hope. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the house. Her heart jumped. She opened the door to find a young boy from the village, breathless and wide-eyed. "They're coming," he whispered. "The elders, they want to take the baby." She grabbed her belly and held it tight. The fight was no longer just about her. It was about the life growing inside. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the sound of heavy footsteps and low voices. She wasn't alone anymore. The footsteps grew louder, pounding like thunder on the dry earth. She held her breath as the village elders gathered at her doorstep, their faces carved with suspicion and judgment. The leader, an old man with a crooked cane, spoke first, his voice sharp and cold. "We come for the child," he declared. "No cursed thing will live among us." Chaik stood beside her, torn between loyalty to his family and the woman carrying his child. He looked at her with eyes full of pain and doubt. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fire burning in her chest. "This child is my blood. My hope. I will not let fear decide his fate." The elders whispered among themselves, but her words echoed louder than their doubts. The madman's medicine rested against her skin, a quiet shield she believed in. Suddenly, the wind swept through the compound, rustling leaves and scattering dust. From the shadows, the madman appeared, tall and calm, holding his staff like a king claiming his throne. "Let the child live," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Fear has no place here." The elders faltered, their courage breaking like dry branches. Slowly, they stepped back, eyes lowered. Chaik took her hand, squeezing it tightly. The fight had only just begun, but for now, the village had heard her truth. The baby kicked once more, a steady drumbeat of life and promise. The village didn't forget that day. Some still whispered, but others watched with new respect. She walked with her head high, her belly heavy with life and courage. Chaik became a quieter man, but his eyes softened when he looked at her. He began to protect her from sharp tongues and cold shoulders, like a lion guarding its pride. The madman visited often now, no longer a shadow but a steady presence. He brought stories of the forest and songs that filled the night air. Sometimes, he danced under the moon, and she watched, amazed by the wild grace in his steps. Her strength grew with the baby. The fear that once lived in her chest faded like morning mist. She learned to trust the strange, to hold on to hope even when the world seemed ready to break. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat outside, hands resting gently on her belly. The village hummed around her, full of life and secrets. She smiled softly, thinking of the journey, of madness, whispers, and love. The baby kicked once, a small reminder of the miracle growing inside. And in that moment, she knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The days grew slower, each one a small victory carved from uncertainty. The baby inside her kicked with growing strength, a tiny drumbeat that filled her heart with a fierce hope. The village's harsh whispers softened, replaced by cautious smiles and occasional nods. Life, though still tangled with questions, began to bloom like wildflowers after the rain. Chaik changed too. His rough edges softened like clay in warm hands. He began to carry water for her, steady and silent. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, he'd brush a stray hair from her face and whisper, "I'm sorry." She never answered. Words felt too small for the weight they carried. The madman became part of their lives, not just a shadow by the stream but a keeper of stories and secrets. He showed her herbs that soothed her aching back, sang songs that made the stars seem closer, and told tales of the forest that danced between truth and myth. At first, she was wary, but soon she found comfort in his wild presence. One evening, a fierce storm rolled over the village. Thunder growled and rain fell like heavy tears from the sky. The mud paths turned to rivers, and the village huddled inside their homes. She sat by the fire, her belly swollen and warm, hands resting protectively. Suddenly, a sharp knock cut through the storm's song. Her heart jumped. Chaik opened the door to find the madman, soaked and shivering but smiling with wild eyes. "It's time," he said simply. She nodded, a mix of fear and strength rising inside her. The night stretched long. She felt the baby's urgent movements, the first pangs of what was to come. Chaik stayed close, holding her hand, whispering prayers she barely heard. When the dawn finally broke, the world was quiet again. In the soft light, a newborn's cry filled the room, a cry fierce and full of life. She looked down at the tiny bundle wrapped in cloth and smiled through tears. The village's doubts still lingered like shadows, but she didn't care. She had crossed the river of fear and found the shore of hope. The child was hers. Her miracle. And nothing could take that away.